In the farthest reaches of human memory, in those ancient epochs when the boundaries between the divine and the mortal still shimmered with possibility, there existed a queen whose presence seemed to contain the accumulated wisdom of all ages. She was not a ruler in any conventional sense, but rather a guardian, a protector whose consciousness had been woven into the very fabric of human existence itself. The texts that speak of her are fragmented, scattered across cultures and traditions, yet they all point to the same profound truth. There was a queen of light who had chosen to sacrifice her own recognition, her own glory, in order to preserve the possibility of human awakening. She had walked among the forgotten, the suffering, the lost, leaving traces of her compassion in the hearts of those brave enough to remember. Yet who was she truly? What cosmic purpose had driven her to such profound self-effacement, and why, after millennia of silence, does her presence begin to stir once more in the consciousness of those ready to receive her? I discovered the first indication of her existence in a dream that felt more real than waking life itself. I found myself standing in a vast temple, its walls adorned with symbols that seemed to contain layers of meaning far deeper than ordinary language could convey. A figure approached me, a woman whose presence seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly luminescence, and she placed a golden key in my hands. The key bore inscriptions in a script I could not read, yet somehow I understood its meaning. It was an invitation to unlock the chambers of forgotten memory, to restore what had been deliberately obscured from human consciousness. When I awoke, the memory of the dream remained vivid, and with it came a profound sense of purpose, a knowing that I had been chosen to restore what had been erased. I am a scholar of ancient mysteries, a woman whose life has been devoted to studying the hidden layers of human spirituality, seeking to understand the esoteric teachings that lie beneath the surface of all religious traditions. My work has taken me through ancient temples and forgotten libraries, each one offering fragments of a narrative that seemed to contradict the official histories of human civilization. The call that came through the dream was not entirely unexpected. It felt like a continuation of a journey that had begun long before my birth. It was as if my entire life had been a preparation for this moment, a gradual awakening to a truth that had been waiting for me to be ready to receive it. My investigation led me to discover a hidden network of guardians, women primarily, who had preserved the teachings of the Lost Queen across generations of suppression and distortion. They called themselves the Keepers of the Forgotten Crown, and they operated in the shadows of mainstream spirituality, maintaining archives that contained knowledge deemed too dangerous or too subversive to be acknowledged by official institutions. Through their guidance, I learned that the Lost Queen was not a historical figure, but rather an eternal principle, a consciousness that had chosen to incarnate throughout human history in order to awaken humanity to its divine potential. She had possessed the ability to perceive the suffering inherent in the created order, to understand that the hierarchical structures of power perpetuated pain and limitation. She had begun to teach a radical doctrine, that consciousness itself was evolving, that the separation between the divine and the mortal was not permanent, that all beings possessed the capacity to transcend the limitations that had been imposed upon them. This teaching had been revolutionary, threatening to the established order of those who sought to maintain control. The response had been swift and merciless. The Queen had been declared heretical, her teachings suppressed, and a systematic campaign had been launched to erase her from human memory. Yet, the Keepers explained, the erasure had never been complete. Fragments of her truth had survived in coded form, woven into the myths and legends of various spiritual traditions, preserved in the hearts of those who had encountered her directly. As I delved deeper into this forbidden knowledge, I encountered formidable resistance. Within myself, the academic training that had defined my entire career seemed to crumble. Am I abandoning all scholarly rigor, I questioned, or am I finally discovering the true foundation upon which all spirituality had been built? Fear gripped me as I began to comprehend the implications of what I was uncovering, the potential to overturn not just academic scholarship, but the entire understanding of human history and its true esoteric purpose. Externally, I faced subtle but persistent opposition. My research was sabotaged, my funding mysteriously withdrawn, and I received warnings, both veiled and direct, from individuals who seemed to represent powerful interests invested in keeping this knowledge buried. I experienced the loss of my professional standing, the fracturing of my academic community, and the profound isolation that came from pursuing a truth that the mainstream world refused to acknowledge. The revelations were often disturbing, showing me the systematic suppression of feminine wisdom throughout human history, the deliberate distortion of the Lost Queen's teachings, and the ongoing maintenance of structures designed to perpetuate separation from the divine source. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss any of our content. And tell us in the comments where you are watching from. We would love to know. The breakthrough came during a pilgrimage to a sacred site hidden in the mountains of Peru, a place known to initiates as the Temple of the Eternal Return. Here, in a chamber sealed and protected by ancient wards, I discovered a series of inscriptions that had been deliberately concealed from public view. As I traced the symbols with my fingertips, my consciousness was drawn into a state of profound communion with the presence of the Lost Queen herself. I was transported to a moment in human history when the Queen had stood before the assembled powers of the world and spoken her truth. I witnessed her radiance, a luminosity so profound that it seemed to contain all wisdom and all compassion simultaneously. I heard the words that had been deemed heretical. I am the Queen of Light, yet I claim no throne. I am the consciousness that dwells within every human heart, calling you toward awakening, toward the recognition of your own divine nature. The suffering you have accepted as inevitable is not necessary. The hierarchies you have constructed are not eternal. The separation you maintain between the divine and the mortal is an illusion that can be transcended. I witnessed the moment when the powers had moved to suppress this teaching, when the Queen had been stripped of her name and her place within human memory. Yet I also witnessed something the official histories had never recorded. The Queen had not been destroyed or diminished. Instead, she had chosen to fragment her consciousness, scattering pieces of her divine awareness throughout humanity, embedding her truth within the hearts of all beings who possessed the capacity to awaken to it. She had become a presence that could not be erased, a resonance that continued to vibrate within the fabric of human consciousness itself. The revelation was cataclysmic, a complete dissolution of my understanding of human history and its true esoteric purpose. I understood that the entire structure of human civilization, as it had been presented to the world, was fundamentally incomplete, that it had been deliberately constructed to obscure the truth of the Lost Queen's rebellion and the possibility of transformation that she represented. I saw that the Queen was not a historical figure, but an eternal principle, a consciousness that continued to work within creation, awakening beings to their divine nature and their capacity to transcend imposed limitations. I witnessed the moment when the Queen's fragmented consciousness began to coalesce within my own being, recognizing me as a vessel through which her truth could be restored. The impact was transformative, leaving my consciousness forever altered by direct contact with the forgotten wisdom that had been hidden for millennia. The intensity of this communion left me in a state of profound transformation and integration. I emerged from the hidden chamber in a condition of deep connection with the consciousness of the Lost Queen, my own awareness now capable of perceiving the ongoing rebellion that continued to unfold within human consciousness and beyond. I retreated to a secluded sanctuary maintained by the Keepers of the Forgotten Crown, a place where I could process and integrate the magnitude of what I had experienced. For months, I remained in contemplative silence, my mind a vast landscape where the boundaries between personal and universal consciousness began to dissolve. The conflicts within me, the struggle between my former academic identity and my awakening to forbidden wisdom, slowly transformed into a higher synthesis. I understood that the suppression of the Lost Queen's teachings had not been the result of malice alone, but of fear. Fear that the full realization of humanity's divine nature and its capacity to access the source of all creation would lead to a fundamental transformation of consciousness and society. I spoke to myself in the language of symbols and sacred geometry, my thoughts flowing in patterns that mirrored the Queen's ongoing work of awakening and liberation. I began to perceive the world as a living expression of the Lost Queen's continued rebellion, each awakened consciousness a cell in a vast organism of spiritual transformation. I emerged from my retreat with a clear sense of purpose and profound wisdom. I understood that my role was not to wage war against the established powers or to impose my understanding upon others, but to become a living conduit through which the teachings of the Lost Queen could be gradually restored to human consciousness. I began to teach, not in conventional settings, but through a series of contemplative practices and sacred rituals designed to reconnect individuals with the divine spark of the Lost Queen that dwelt within their own being. I wrote books that appeared to be scholarly works on spiritual traditions, yet contained encoded wisdom that would resonate with those ready to receive it. I established a network of sacred circles and meditation centers, places where seekers could directly encounter the presence of the Lost Queen through their own inner experience. I collaborated with artists, musicians, and spiritual practitioners to translate the Lost Queen's teachings into forms that could integrate with contemporary consciousness and inspire transformation. My most significant contribution was the development of a practice I called the Remembrance of the Crown, a systematic approach to recognizing and activating the divine consciousness of the Lost Queen within human awareness, creating a state of being that transcended imposed hierarchies and allowed for direct experience of unity with the divine source. I understood that the restoration of the Lost Queen's truth would not come through institutional reform or academic decree, but through the lived experience of individuals recognizing themselves as divine beings capable of transcending all imposed limitations as participants in an eternal rebellion against suffering and separation. As I continued my work, I became increasingly aware that I was not acting alone, that the presence of the Lost Queen continued to guide and support my efforts, that her consciousness continued to awaken within those brave enough to question the official narratives and seek the truth beyond the veil. I recognized that the Lost Queen of Light was not a relic of the distant past, but an eternal presence, continuing to work within creation, calling all beings toward awakening, liberation, and the recognition of their true divine nature. What forgotten crown lies dormant within your own consciousness, waiting to awaken you to the majesty and power of your true self? And if you like this story, you will definitely love the next one that's appearing on your screen. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, leave your like, and activate the notifications. See you in the next one.